So, I've previously spoken at length regarding how the consciousness of ultimate willful parasitism, or evil, utilizes the creation of false virtues to manufacture the consent of humanity on a global scale to steal our power and enslave us. In this video, I'm going to go into that in somewhat greater detail, as there are certain components of how false virtues are manufactured to divide people which need to be more consciously well understood by everybody who's currently fighting the good fight, if we're ever going to have any hope of guiding humanity away from our current path of decay and destruction and building a better, safer, more virtuous and loving future. If you have any questions regarding the construct of the development of false virtues to control people, feel free to ask them in the comment section. So one of the key components of all psychospiritual manipulation is the subliminal limiting of the perceived definitions of words, and able to further program and bind how people are capable of communicating and interacting based off the beliefs they associate with the defined words. This leads directly to the manufacturing of more complex illusions, because when people have an inhibited perception of the meaning of certain terms, they are easily led towards false conclusions. One of the most obvious examples of this is the subliminal definition of the word conspiracy. Conspiracy means a secret plan by a group to do something unlawful or harmful. However, due to intense subliminal conditioning, particularly of the term conspiracy theorist, humanity at large has been led to perceive the word conspiracy subliminally as an absurd paranoia, and a conspiracy theorist as a paranoid and irrational person. Due to this pervasive global subconscious conditioning, most people simply do not have a word in their entire vocabulary which means a secret plan by a group to do something unlawful or harmful, because the word conspiracy can't be used according to that definition. Further, there is no association in most people's minds for the act of theorizing about secret plans to do unlawful or harmful things, because that is automatically correlated to absurd paranoia. And if you truly understand what that means, what I'm saying here, and this is just the most glaringly obvious example from thousands of examples, but if you understand it, then your mind automatically expands to how this parasitic control is manufactured. It has been incredibly easy to conspire and lie to mankind at large for decades, because people have been taught to think that the act of contemplating conspiracies is insane. And that same tactic was applied to UFOs. That same tactic has been applied to the manipulation of the word gender. That same tactic has been applied to racial terminology. That same tactic has been obviously applied to the political spectrum, and that same tactic has been applied to God, and that same tactic has been applied to awakening by manufacturing the construct of woke, which is the opposite of awakened. It makes awakening seem like a joke in people's minds. This specific tactic of subliminally limiting the way people conceive of how to define words is the most powerful and damaging tactic of how to control others, how to bind people's minds and souls that exists. This is an eternal method of manipulation, and people at large need to understand this and able to begin to see past it, and able to begin to take control of their own power rather than having it stripped from them. And what it really means to overcome this manipulation of language is that we have to thoroughly understand how we are defining our own terminology, our own words, our own beliefs, before we even try to form conclusions. Our conclusions are very easy to manipulate if we do not understand our own terminology. And further, what this means is that in able to argue, in able to conclusively disagree with anybody about anything, we must first necessarily define all of the terms which we are using to build to our conclusions. I honestly believe that the vast majority of disagreements among mankind are disagreements of our foundational terminology before we even actually reach the culmination of our outlooks and beliefs. Most people, if they understood what it takes to actually efficiently debate by breaking down terms until you are positive that you agree upon the foundational language you are using before building back up to where you believe your disagreement is occurring, most people would find argumentation way too tiresome to even bother with. But because people operate under faulty and limited terminology, they think their conclusions are absolute, and then they bicker from their conclusions, often while both parties, based upon the logic of their definitions of what they're arguing about, both parties are actually logical and moral. But they never actually break down how they're defining things and able to really prove their logic. And it's understandable to be a bit lazy in that regard, but that intellectual laziness allows malicious, parasitic, infinitely devious sociopaths and psychopaths to conspire and to trap people in false constructs of logic and virtue. And there are honestly very few things in the whole of reality that are more important for the development of the awareness of the average person than understanding this.